All right, 2019 is here. We've got a new episode and a new hope in front of us for the coming year. You're listening to Constructive Interference. Well, welcome back to Constructive Interference. I am your host, Joel Kurtnitis, here with Josh Hugo. My gosh, a brand new year, Josh. Can you believe this?
Well,
just another one.
It happens every year, so it's not really surprising.
I don't know. It always surprises me. Honestly, ever since the invention of the atom bomb, I'm always surprised with another new year. I mean, it's just from a statistical standpoint, it's always a little bit surprising to me.
Well, I mean, the chances of all of us being killed by a bomb, it's unlikely. Probably somebody's gonna have a new year anyway, most likely. So.
Okay.
I'm not sure you're being quite realistic there with that particular fear.
Well, we weren't. I mean, this is not how we planned to kick off the program, but to be argumentative, I will tell you that 300 simultaneously detonated nuclear bombs would set fire to the atmosphere and destroy all life on Earth as we know it. Just saying.
Okay. I'll take your word for that.
I'll try to, if I can't link to that in the show notes, you guys will have to wait for a future episode. But speaking of New Year's, New Year means new resolutions. And what better resolution than adding CI to your social media feed? I mean, come on. If you are not following us on social media yet, or if you didn't last year for whatever reason, 2019 is a great time to do that. Make sure you head out to Facebook. Follow us on facebook.com/TheCI Show and on Twitter @TheCI Show. We just have a lot of fun. We post a lot of thoughtful things out there. We want to get your feedback. We want to get your take. And we just want to interact with you, find out what you care about so that we can put it into future episodes. Another really exciting thing that we have coming up for you in 2019 is we are going to start bringing on guests who have much more interesting and informative opinions than we do. And so I think there'll be a lot of exciting things coming up this year. So make sure that you are tuning in. Make sure that you're catching the podcast. Make sure that you're following us on social media. And if you have an extra minute, we would love to have you head out to Facebook and give us a recommendation there, write a review, and maybe even tell a few friends. If you have enjoyed the program, if you enjoyed what we're putting out, make sure to tell somebody so that they can tune in and listen as well and join the conversation. So 2018's gone. Really exciting end to the year, really exciting holiday. And for me, today is special as well. Not only is it New Year's Day, but it's also my 5th anniversary with my beautiful wife, Kelsey, who has changed my life by marrying me. And boy, am I a lucky guy. And so coming into this year starts out with that extra kick in the pants for me in terms of motivation and resolutions like, hey, here are the goals that I have for myself. Here are the goals that I have for our family. But let's broaden that out even further to the country and even the world. What was 2018 like for humanity?
Well, your comment about nuclear war was interesting because what was 2018 not like for humanity? I mean, we've had...
Right. No nuclear winter, that's a plus.
No nuclear winter, no atmosphere on fire, which might come as a surprise to people from past times. I was reading the book 2001, A Space Odyssey again. I was reading that to my kids. And it's funny because in 2001, it was written in 1968, and Arthur C. Clarke, writing from that time period, anticipated global famines in 2001 because he thought there were going to be 6 billion people on Earth by then, and how could we feed all those people? It was just going to be impossible, and we would have to flee to the moon and Mars to find enough space. And
Which means one important thing. He didn't look forward and see that the world actually ended because of Y2K.
That's true. History didn't... And that's another great example. It's like, what hasn't happened? I guess the future is still out there, but I mean, the Y2K bug didn't take us out, and Skynet hasn't taken us out yet.
Give it time. Musk is working.
But yes, but there have been so many things, so many events anticipated by people in the past. Like, remember the character Khan in Star Trek? You must.
Oh, who could forget?
Who could forget, yes. Well, do you remember that Khan originally was supposed to have been a man from, of course, when Star Trek was first made back in the 60s. The 90s were the distant future, and they figured Khan was this Superman who had been created in 1992. And 1992 was when the eugenics wars happened and killed tens of millions of people. It was a terrible time. And of course, we have the predictions when George Orwell wrote 1984, he was thinking, 40 years in the future, this is what things might be like. And so we've dodged just so many bullets, if you want to think of it that way, as far as what people in the past anticipated this time period would be like. It's just so many bad things that haven't happened,
And that's not to suggest that there aren't things that are terrible, that there aren't wars and other things that have gone on as they always have in human history, right?
Oh no, I mean, no, life has its share. I mean, no, I don't want to create the impression that everything is all rosy for everybody, of course. But as how bad could things be? It's like we could have had the nuclear winter. We could have had the famines. We could have had these great plagues that have been predicted, and things are actually been pretty decent for most people. I mean, you can just look at global population, which has cracked 7 billion, and looks to be stabilizing. But nobody really ever predicted that we would have this many people doing this well at this time. Things are going pretty well. As a matter of fact, there was a report out this year from the Brookings Institute saying that we have reached a global milestone, if you want to think of it that way. We now have over 50% of the world's population is considered to be middle class.
Wow.
Yes. Now, of course, throughout most of human history, people just sort of eked out a living. We talk about today about living paycheck to paycheck. Well, that's been the standard for most of humanity throughout most of history. Only instead of living paycheck to paycheck, you live harvest to harvest. And if your vegetables don't grow right one season, hey, some of your kids are going to starve because you got nothing to fall back on. But today we have over half of the people on Earth being considered middle class, which means they not only have enough to survive, but they have enough to have extra. They can buy extra luxuries. They can spend money on entertainment. They can spend money on technologies that improve their lives or education that improves themselves. And this has become now widespread. And it's become widespread on the Earth that has more people on it than ever before.
Now, I had not seen the Brookings piece that you're referring to, but I do know just a couple years ago that we had, according to, I believe, the IMF, we had reached a new low in global poverty. Like in all of history, extreme poverty is now at the lowest rate it's ever been. Which was shocking enough on its own. So this is even up from that, you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, those two things are related, of course. But yeah, so I mean, any way you want to cut it, the average person on Earth at this time is richer than ever before in history.
And that's also, I might point out, that's also in comparison to current times only. Because, I mean, if you compare against all of history, right, go back 1,000 years, and the average person today who is homeless in the United States has everything far, far better than they had it back then, right? Because just access to, a pair of modern shoes or a pair of, a normal trailer in a trailer park is just far, far, far above running water, these things that they didn't have centuries and centuries ago.
Oh yeah. I mean, even our poor people in America are rich by the standards of anybody 200 years ago. The people in America today who we consider to be pitiable, to be poor, to be living on the edge of destitution, those people would have been considered to be very well off by almost anyone. Even during Queen Victoria's time, which it wasn't that long ago.
Right. I always think that, and I talk to my wife about that whenever we go grocery shopping, because I think a grocery store is just a miracle. I just cannot believe. I'm here. I'm up in the the northern temperate zone up here, where basically nothing grows from October through April, and I'm looking in, and I can just drive a mile down the road, and I can get oranges and lemons and fresh produce from all over the world, and fish, even though I'm 1,000 miles from the nearest ocean. And it just blows my mind that right now, and again, this is not something that only exclusively the top 2% of society can walk in and get these things. This is normal people can just walk in off the street and go grab whatever food they want from wherever in the world it came from.
Yeah, and that's not the only good news from this year, for the globe. I know since 9/11, which was how many years ago? Is that 18 years ago now? It's 2019, yep. So yeah, 18 years ago, when we entered what was supposed to be this new global era when terrorism was going to be the new big threat we had to worry about. The Cold War was over. Now the war on terror had begun. But terrorism, I'm reading this article here from the Washington Post, and of course it's very difficult to actually gauge such things with any accuracy, but it looks like global terrorism was down about 40% this year.
Wow, 40%?
Yeah, I'll link to the article in the show notes. Of course, it's really difficult to measure, especially when you consider the global scope and how we don't necessarily have good tracking on a lot of these things. But yeah, they're figuring about 40% in terms of the number of people who were victimized by terrorists during this year. We're talking about 40% decrease.
Wow. Well, there's only one reasonable explanation, and that is that most of them went into phone scamming instead.
I have, at least in my personal view, I've seen increase in phone scamming, and that's, I mean, maybe that's Skynet
Honestly,
revving
I
up.
think we can classify that as terrorism. Let's be honest. Let's just classify that as terrorism and get it over with.
If you have like a noiophobia and you're terrorized by petty annoyances, I suppose, but that's not me.
Oh yeah,
I don't know
when
what
I'm
you consider terrifying, Joel, but that doesn't.
yeah, when that caller ID shows up and it says risk level high, yeah, that's pretty traumatizing.
I mean, and of course, let's talk about North Korea. Of course, that situation is still developing. We don't know exactly what's going to happen with North and South Korea, but we've seen significant progress. We've seen Kim Jong-un, after being touted, by our own press as being this huge nuclear threat that was going to start lobbing bombs. I remember seeing maps on the news showing which U.S. cities he could hit with his nukes. And he was supposed to start lobbing these things at us any day. Well, he's expressed interest in giving up his, of course, we don't want to say commitment because this is Kim Jong-un we're talking about. But
Sure.
as much as someone like him could do so, he's made a commitment to giving up nuclear weapons. We have demilitarization, peace talks happening between North and South Korea. Nobody thought that was ever going to happen. That's an extremely significant, event for global peace in our time. So it's actually been a lot of good news for, I guess you want to say, for humanity in 2018. It's been a pretty up year.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, and technology continues to progress. I mean, we're seeing the commercialization of space. We're continuing to see more and more, expansion of the internet and the internet access, and we've already seen what can come from that in terms of productivity and innovation, and even political revolutions and movements. Some of which have been good and some of which have been bad. But the decentralization of power that is happening in our generation is also a massive benefit, and that's something that, well, if we're going to talk about the internet, there's another great and terrible prediction that never came to pass was the end of the internet thanks to net neutrality, right?
Oh yeah,
yeah. So that's another prediction of doom that didn't really come to pass.
yeah.
And so what we've continued to see actually is expanded access. We've seen competition continue to steady or even in some cases push down prices. We're seeing a push to expand the number of suppliers. So, I mean, I think these are trends that are going to continue because ultimately, what people want, people eventually will get if there's enough of them. And so, I think when you see these things, humanity is starting to push in these directions, and it's kind of fascinating to compare against what people thought civilization was going to be doing 50, 70, 80, 100 years away, and what we actually are doing. It's really interesting to see, and people always bring up the hoverboard, right? Why don't we have a hoverboard? We were promised a hoverboard and flying cars. Okay, but is that what you would actually rather have? I mean, if you offered people the choice,
I would fall off a hoverboard
for R&D. Well, I'm just saying, like, if you offered people the choice between a hoverboard or a supercomputer in your palm that can make phone calls, browse the internet, check 100 different apps, make you more productive at work, everything that the average cell phone now does, which one would people take?
That's tough.
I mean, I just feel like it's, well, yeah, I mean, I'm just saying.
It's not actually tough. It's not, obviously
right.
You take the supercomputer in your pocket, but I want to say it's tough because hoverboard just be so cool. But
right. And there's a lot of, actually, there was a great Pop-Tarts ad that I saw this weekend. I don't often watch TV, but being that there was a holiday, it's this great Pop-Tarts ad where this kid is comparing, saying that Pop-Tarts are basically the coolest thing ever, and then his sister comes in a hover bike. And nope, Pop-Tarts are the coolest thing ever. So I think that's why hoverboards were on my mind this weekend.
They're on my mind all the time, but maybe that's just
me. Yeah, that's fact. I mean, we did grow up watching Back to the Future, right?
Yeah. We talk about the internet too. It's another thing. I don't want to comment on it beyond this, but the whole Mueller investigation, Russiagate, he hasn't really found anything yet. It's kind of looking like maybe Donald Trump actually isn't a Russian plant in Putin's pocket. But you think about if all the hype for Russiagate had come to pass, if the president of the United States really were a Russian pawn because Russia had hacked the election, which was the hype, that's what people were saying about it. But if that were really true, like how bad would that be? But it's looking like that's probably not true. So there's another crisis that I guess didn't come to pass or fizzled out. Add that to the list.
Well, right. And so I think, I mean, when it comes to, if you want to bring Trump into it, I feel like there is the consternation regarding Trump. And I want to be charitable in the way that I interpret this, because it's easy to come at it from one's own personal bias and say, well, they just hate him, or I just love him, or the Team MAGA or Team Resist or whatever. But I feel like if you look at it, there is a tendency to overreact to things. That we've discussed that before on the program, Josh Hugo. But there's a tendency to overreact and either make people into saints or devils, and just turn everything into a giant affair. Well, because a lot of people profit from that type of thing now. But as I look back on 2018, I feel like a lot of things were actually, the majority of American culture and politics were actually remarkably moderate. Um, and when I compare it to, especially with all the rhetoric of overthrows and resistance and all these things, when you compare it to actual revolutions and things that have gone on in history, there's just not much there, even in terms of the way that governance was run here in the United States. And I do understand. I mean, don't get me wrong here. I do understand where there are reasons for concern in terms of national division and the rhetoric heating up, and we've talked about this where there's riots and things like that. I understand that we have issues, but overall, the things that have been the catalysts for revolutions and violent uprisings and terrible things going down in countries historically, those signs are not present in the United States right now.
No.
And that doesn't mean that we need to continue to watch for them and guard against them. We do. And I think there's some valid concern to people who say, well, it never starts out this way. We have to keep our guard up. That's for sure. The price of liberty is eternal vigilance. I get that. But also have a sense of context and a sense of perspective, right?
Yeah. There's been a lot of hype. And the whole Trump presidency, mostly by the left, who tried to sell Trump as some sort of a tyrant, evil dictator figure coming in, but also from the right too. I've seen people, praising Trump as the savior of Western civilization, and similar things. But really, there's just been a lot of hype. And honestly, the last 2 years, the last 1 year, 2018 especially, as far as life for the average American, this has been pretty moderate. It's been mostly just business as usual. And nothing's really been surprising or changed or alarming as much as people try to pretend. Our first episode here was about the Brett Kavanaugh, nomination, and the Democrats were going crazy trying to paint Kavanaugh as this icon of all sorts of evil. And of course, you have the counter reaction from the Republicans trying to paint him as some sort of a saint or a genius. But no, I mean, he's just a guy. He's not, as far as I can tell, as far as what I've heard, very remarkable in any sense. Judges aren't known for being colorful figures or visionary figures necessarily. You don't really want a judge to be those things. And it all just seems like a lot of hype. Everything's been hype. And really, it's all been pretty low key.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think that when we look at the way that we react to these things, we tend to get ourselves whipped up into a frenzy over not much of anything. And honestly, when you look at the way that the American system was set up, I would say that things are going according to plan, or things went basically according to plan in 2018. And what I mean by that is this. The American system was set up, the American system government anyway, was set up with a tremendous amount of stability, because it's kind of like a system of elevator brakes. Being the nerd that I am, I watched something this last week on YouTube about elevator brakes. How likely are you to die in an elevator, or something like that? And one of the first things they set out with was there's so much redundancy in elevator braking systems that you're not likely to ever be in any sort of dangerous situation, because if one fails, there's another one. If that one fails, there's another one. If that one fails, there's another one. Every component can stand alone. All of this. And that sort of fail-safe system was built into American government. That's why we're so stable, right? There is supposed to be friction. There is supposed to be this massive weight of inertia, such that when you do have an election like 2016 and a single party takes control of everything, they can't just go in and do everything that they want, because there's so much inertia. And it takes a tremendous will to drive forward, even when you do hold all the keys. And I think that's been the disappointment of some on the right, is that there hasn't been more done when Republicans did hold all the keys to the castle, that there wasn't more getting done. But it's the same thing. It's the same thing. Something similar happened in 2008 after Obama's election. We got in. Not all of the left's priorities went in either. And so it really is a question of what's important to you. But overall, I said all that to say that the system that we have, when people talk about the system being broken, I think you need to be a little more specific than that, because much of the system is actually working exactly as it was designed to work. You may just not like the outworking of it. When we look at the way that people are reacting to things and like you're talking about, the things are going well globally. I sort of feel like, and I could be wrong here, but I'm going to make a judgment call and say that I think the reason that people overreact, especially here in the U.S. as we look at social media and things like that, I think that one of the reasons that people overreact is exactly because things are so good.
Hmm.
That's where the whole first world problems meme came from, right? Is that people have the luxury of worrying about these things because we're not a hunter gatherer society, because people aren't starving to death around us, because the Black Plague isn't wiping out hundreds of thousands of people that we're throwing into carts on the street. All the problems that people have had to contend with throughout all of history, and much of the world still has to. By the way, like there's still plenty of countries for whom clean water is a major concern and a day to day concern for people all over the world. We don't have those concerns here. It's pretty rare. And in the absence of those, that's where I think you encounter these folks who are going out and just making mountains out of microaggressions, if you will. Because and I'm sure at this. So did you see the GameStop video? I have to ask.
Yes, I saw the GameStop video. Yes, it's not sir, it's ma'am.
Yes.
And
so
that person now is surely famous forever, not for a reason they probably want, but
indeed. So there was a case of misgendering. For anybody who isn't familiar with what we're talking about, there is a case of misgendering, a very high profile case of misgendering at a game store. And a video came up of a customer who was supposedly misgendered by an employee there, just losing it, going crazy on this place and kicking things and screaming and cursing and all this stuff at the store. And of course it's become a meme online. Everything does now. But I look at that and I think, my goodness, like where is the perspective? I mean, even if you stay away from the validity of the whole trans issue itself at the moment, you can still look at the perspective of it and the context of it and say, well, my gosh, where's the problem here in terms of like, does it really justify this sort of response?
Well, you think,
And
don't do me cut you off, but it's like, how good does your life have to be? How easy do you have to have it before someone calling you the wrong pronoun by accident becomes an issue that you lose it over, Or we as a society, because of course you have people taking sides on anytime such an issue becomes viral on the internet, people want to take sides about it. Like, how good as a society do we have to have it before these are the sorts of things that offend us?
right. Yeah, and I think that sort of goes back to what I was talking about in terms of history. We have it so good, and all of the things that you talked about as well in terms of look at the way the world's trending, look at the way that human potential has grown, look at the way that society is improving, look at the way that technology is improving our lives. And but the problem is that a lot of people, especially our age, and I think the next generation too, don't have that context because we don't know history. And I'm a history nerd, and I feel like that has been a benefit to me at different times in my life. But one of my professors actually said that which had a brilliant statement that talked about how the study of history not only provides perspective, it promotes good judgment. You can't have good judgment without an understanding of history. Another more popularized way of saying that is those who don't study history are doomed to repeat it. And when you look at that, there was an article circulating on social media again this week that was originally out in April or May of this year, I believe, but it was making the rounds again here lately, discussing the fact that 2/3 of American millennials don't know what Auschwitz was.
Wow,
that's dangerous.
2/3.
Two-thirds do not know what Auschwitz was.
Wow.
That's an incredibly, right. It's incredibly dangerous. It's almost ludicrous.
Well, it's like that explains why they think that they can think Trump is Hitler because they don't know who Hitler was.
Right, exactly. And it's like, and there's all sorts of theories about how that has come to be the case and problems with American education system and whatnot. But that kind of ignorance, that is what can quickly turn microaggressions into just martyrdom. That is the kind of thing that makes our own little personal problems paramount in our own importance. So, I think that there's a way to move away from that, but I think it's going to require some change on our part, which, hey, today's January 1st, 2019. It's a great time to change, right? So let's talk about some New Year's resolutions. And I wanted to kick that off a little bit just by saying, switching gears here, and I promise we'll get back to the idea of how we make things more important than they should be. But I struggle. I just got to confess, I can struggle a little bit with New Year's resolutions because I don't understand setting this arbitrary marker and saying, well, I'm going to change everything now. That's just tough for me. I don't get that. The Bible says in one place, one man esteems one day above another. Another man esteems every day alike. Let each be fully persuaded in his own mind. I'm the everyday alike guy. I mean, I just don't understand. I don't really, I don't understand all the holiday hype sometimes, and like there's just a lot of things I just don't get. But New Year's resolutions is definitely one of them. Now, there's a lot of reasons that people struggle with New Year's resolutions, and if you go out and do a Google search on it, you'll find all sorts of psychoanalysis. But I think it really comes down to the fact that human beings don't we're not wired to just dramatically change in a moment outside of like severe trauma. And honestly, you even hear stories about severe trauma where people still don't change their habits. Like the city can be burning down around them and they're still trying to drive to work. Like it's that kind of thing that these habits are ingrained in us and they're very, very hard to change. And that's why I say it connects to what we were talking about earlier in terms of how we react and how we sense these things, and how whether we have an accurate view of whether the world is getting better or the world is getting worse. Because if we're wired to think in a certain way, you don't just change that on a dime.
Well, no, I mean, any sort of training, even. I mean, you practice a sport, you practice instruments, you practice to do good at anything. What you're doing when you practice is making it habitual. You're making it instinctual. If someone's like a kung fu master, when they see a punch coming at them, they don't like stop and think, I wonder what I should do now. What would be the best tactic for avoiding this punch? It's so they just do it. It's muscle memory. And, and all of our, well, not all, but so much of our behavior is like that. It's like we don't really stop and think about what to do at the moment. We do it by habit. And so if we want to change, we really need to change our habits.
Right. And see, that's to get back to New Year's resolutions. That's my thing is, I don't know why that has to be a yearly thing, because I feel like if you're going to be successful with that, it should be a daily thing. And I'm not sitting like the wise man on the mountain, right? Like I've failed a ton of resolutions myself. Okay, I have a ton of habits that I would love to change. I have a ton of things that I would love to improve in the coming year, and that I plan to improve in the coming year. But there are things that I've been thinking about for a while, and starting to prepare for in the meantime, because I know I'm not just going to wake up. I didn't just wake up this morning and everything was different. I'm not going to wake up tomorrow and have everything be different. I have a series of neural pathways that are just built right into my brain that says I need to do things in this way because that's the way that's most convenient, or that's the way that's most familiar, or take your pick, any sort of reason that works for you. But once the weight of that habit is there, it's difficult to get out of. And I would say that when we try to change our years without changing our days, it's just an exercise in futility. And I think that if we can change our thinking in this as individuals and as a country, honestly, that it'll promote a sort of a sense of ownership and a sense of responsibility that can be really helpful to not just our own personal habits, but I think also, more importantly, to the dialogue that's going on in our country and the societal and cultural dialogue that people have correctly noted has grown so toxic. I wrote an article this past week in the Des Moines Register that was called 2019 Can Be the Year America Finds Commonality Again. And I had to I had to sort of brace myself, because I know as soon as you go out there and put out a call for unity, or a call to try to come together, or limit divisiveness, you're gonna automatically incur the wrath of everybody who has a vested interest in being in one extreme or the other, right? The tribes are going to start shooting at you. And so immediately, I'm waiting to be called a moderate and a squish and a sellout, all those things. It's just sort of the nature of the beast. But what the point of the article was to say, I think that when it comes to unity, which really is built on, the thing that we were talking about earlier about how we sense the world is going, whether it's getting better or worse, whether things are a threat to us or whether they're not, whether people are a threat to us or whether they're not. The problem is we need to personalize that question. And when I have seen people discussing unity, maybe Josh, you had a different experience on this, but when I have seen these articles decrying the lack of unity and talking about how we need to come together, all these things, it's typically really disingenuous. It's typically people looking to say, shame on the other side, look at all the division they're causing, this is why they're evil. And I just can't go there. That doesn't help anyone. when you use that, I mean, you can read the first couple paragraphs. You like, yeah, I agree. We're really divided. America's really messed up. Trump and Hillary and red and blue, and like we're all divided, urban and rural, and we just don't understand each other. But then you get past the first two paragraphs, and well, meaning the conclusion obviously is that it's all Team Red's fault or it's all Team Blue's fault, and it's frustrating. I get really frustrated with that. Do you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. One of my favorite phrases is I always hear people say that we need to have a conversation about race in America. And when you hear somebody say that, we need to have a conversation about race, what they inevitably mean is they want to tell you how everything is all one race's fault and they need to change. That's the conversation. That seems to follow into to other issues too. It's like people don't have a conversation. They just want to tell you how you're wrong and how you need to change. That's the conversation they want to have as if we're like a parent, like they're the parent, you're the child, and you better listen up. Which is, of course,
Right.
not helpful to anybody.
Mhm. And what I've seen, and this is, it's a longer trend than modern American history. Obviously, everybody looks to leaders to promote unity. Everybody looks to leaders to pull us together because it's happened a select few times in American history, and we seem to remember those times. They seem to be ingrained in our memory, where we just have these happy, it's a wonderful life sort of moments where everyone comes together at the end of the day. If we just elect the right person, we'll all be in the streets throwing confetti and singing Auld Lang Syne. It's going to be great. And that doesn't really happen. It's very rare in history to see a figure be able to pull together, that those sort of strictly polarized parties. And I think the problem is the longer we wait for some earthly savior to come up and come up with a solution to our division, these wounds keep deepening. And the problem is that there's no incentive. We're not personalizing this question. We're sort of outsourcing it to politicians and pundits and assuming that they want to change things, that they want to reach out to people on the other side, that they want bipartisanship and they want reasonability and decency. No, they don't. They really don't. I mean, that's the problem, is that and I'm not saying this to pin the blame on people at the top. Don't get me wrong. I'm saying that there's no incentive for people in these industries to make anything better. Like there's not any incentive. If you are profiting from people throwing rocks at each other, there's not a lot of incentive for you to get in the middle and tell them to stop. And that's really what it comes. I mean, it's a simple metaphor, but that's really what it is. If you are a politician, why on earth would you sacrifice your own base reaching out to the middle and trying to find common ground with the other side? You won't. And people don't anymore. There's no incentive there to do that. You're going to lose anything that you have, and somebody else is going to beat you and take your spot by doing what you were not willing to do. And a similar thing is playing out among, the punditry and the quote journalists, where you have people who are just invested in fighting each other. That's the point of the program, is to have people get on and spit mad destruction at each other. And I wish that I could say it's because they're all bad people and they're not virtuous like us, the working class. But that's not true. It's not true. The problem is they do it because we want it. We want it. We pay their bills for this.
Mhm.
This is what we pay them to do. We pay, Bill Maher and Rachel Maddow and Sean Hannity and we pay these people to go on there and be ridiculous. That's what we want. We want to sit there with our popcorn and we want to cheer for our side. And nobody wants a tie game and nobody likes the refs. Okay, we just want to see so and so destroys somebody else, so and so embarrasses somebody else with facts. Like that's what we want, and it's in our nature, and it's not a very pretty thing sometimes.
No.
But there's not going to be any solutions there, is what I'm getting at.
Yeah. Well, it's like the easiest way to. I have this theory that this is the reason why people commit acts of vandalism. You think, why does somebody go up and deface a statue? Why does somebody smash a window if they don't even know the person who owns the store or whatever? The easiest way to build yourself up, as every bully knows, is to tear someone else down. And if you can tear someone else down and make yourself seem better than they are, you don't need to bother building yourself up with anything substantial. If I just need to establish that I am superior to that guy, I don't need anything to stand on myself. I've already got a spot. And I think that's the big appeal of a sort of a destruction, embarrassment rhetoric that you're talking about, is people love to feel superior.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, I think that we have to personalize the question. We're going to have to take ownership of it, because there's no way that you can hop online, and this is where most of these, most of this dialogue occurs, right? It's online, and there's no way that you can hop online and say, Trump is an evil human being. Look at how he's dividing Americans. We can't be friends anymore. People are at each other's throats, and then have someone contradict you in the next comment, and then call them a bunch of names and walk away.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's don't you see the connection there? Trump, it's like, and there's been tons of articles written about this. It's not just Trump. It's across the board. We have created the toxic stew, the toxic sludge from which this arose. I mean, that's the problem, is we've created a market. We were talking earlier about the market. People get what people want. Well, people right now want fights. That's what we want. We want politics to be UFC, and we're getting it. And so, like,
it's just, I mean, yeah, we literally, the president was actually in the WWF ring famously. Yes, we're getting it. We're getting fights for politics.
I can already see the angry comments for conflating UFC and WWE, but we'll leave that aside for the moment. The responsibility of unity is going to fall to us. There is nothing, even if tomorrow, an angel descended and took over the White House and possessed Donald Trump, and he just said all the right things, did all the right things, and was a total perfect human being. There's no way that anything that he said or did could bring people in America instantly together again. It's not possible. We have self-inflicted wounds, and the problem is we don't own up to them. And so I think, in terms of resolutions for the coming year, I think there's a few things that we can do that will help us learn to sort of moderate these things, to sort of come back together in some sense. And when I say come back together, do not mistake it for saying we should not disagree, because I am a fan of argument. I am a fan of disagreement. I believe that is a great way. It's a great tool for finding truth. I believe you take an idea and you throw all the facts, evidence, and truth that you can against it as hard as you can, and you destroy as much of it as you possibly can. And then whatever is left standing at the end of that, you accept. And so I am not saying stop challenging people, stop challenging ideas, none of that. What I'm saying is that you can do that in a way that still maintains your integrity, that still maintains your decency, and that doesn't treat other people like dirt. That's what I'm saying. And if you fail to do so, then you're really, it's a statement against you. It's a statement about your lack of intelligence and ability, not the statement on the other person.
Well, I love a phrase you used in your article, Joel, which was, you said we need to individualize people. And I think a lot of it is what that comes down to, is when we argue with people in these sort of savage, disrespectful ways you're talking about, it's like we cease to see them as being individuals. We see them as archetypes. An archetype being an instance or an atom of some larger nebulous force. We think of the left or the right. And the individual who we're talking to, we don't think of as a person. We think of them as being just one of the many faces of the left, just some appendage or atom of the left or of the right. And when you see people that way, it's impossible to empathize with them. And if you don't empathize with people, then you can't understand why they believe the things they do. And it's so easy just to think of people as stupid or as evil or as some other adjective, without considering the complexity of their mind, of their experience, and why they might think the things they do. And so you're absolutely right. We need to individualize people and realize the person you're talking to is an individual with their own experience, their own reasons, and you need to address them in that way.
Right. And in the section that you're referring to in there, I was actually talking about, and we can go into the problems with the left, and we do fairly often with intersectionality and whatnot. But the section that you're talking about, I was actually talking about the need to stop othering people, the need to stop dividing into these tribes and camps. And something I saw earlier in the week just made me sick. And like I said, we go off on the left often enough. But I went to look at an article about an 8-year-old Guatemalan immigrant who passed away in one of the detention centers last week. And of course, it immediately became political. But the first comment on there that I saw said, "This is an 8-year-old child that just died in this camp of disease." And the comment was, "One less illegal, good riddance." That was what somebody actually commented on. It's about the death of an 8-year-old boy. Okay, and it's that kind of thing that I look at, and I can't. There's no place in my mind that I can even file that. It's just a senseless, hateful, stupid statement.
It's evil. It's an evil statement.
It's evil. It's evil. It's horrific. And so it's like I look at that and I said, this is definitely not. This is the commitment or the resolution, if you will, to stop othering people. It doesn't matter which side of the political aisle you're on. You can embrace that one because somebody on your side's doing it. That much is guaranteed. Um, there's another point that I have in here about disagreeing without being disagreeable. I'm not always perfect at this. I get fired up. I get passionate. I sometimes say things that are short tempered or stupid, and I think we all do. But there is a way. There are ways to approach this from a way that says, okay, I can disagree with you. I can still, even if I don't respect your position at all, I can still find a way to have a conversation with you with the acknowledgement that as soon as I get angry and start going off on you, it's not going to do any of us any good. There's not really any chance of resolution, and we just kind of stroke our own egos and then hop off to go talk to people who agree with us.
Right.
And there's no progress made. It's a colossal waste of time and energy. And again, you could say it's just me, it's just my Facebook page, it's just my Twitter feed, whatever. But it's not. And when you pile up those experiences and those interactions times millions, that's what the fabric of our society is. That's what our days and our nights are largely made of now. And so I think there's room there to be to disagree without being disagreeable. One of the I mean, and I took there's some ways that you can look at like the classical arts of logic and rhetoric to get around these. I mean, definitely establish your definitions up front. That really helps, right? If we're not talking about two different things and arguing two different points, that's much better, right? At least we're talking about the same thing. Learn to agree on your premises. Try to find places where you can agree on a premise up front and say, well, I don't know where this is going to go in terms of conclusions, but I can agree with you that there is a problem and it looks like this. Find those points of commonality. It helps. It helps in those discussions, and you'll find that if you pass things through in that way, people will at least give you the time of day.
Well, I think the most important thing, I mean, this is what you said feeds into this. Think about what is the purpose of having an argument. Is my purpose in having an argument to discover the truth?
Own the libs?
Or is my purpose to own the libs or to destroy? is my purpose to own this person, to defeat them and demoralize them and make them embarrassed at their stupidity? Is that my purpose? Well, if that's my purpose in the argument, then I shouldn't even go into it. I mean, not only is that not loving, not only is it unchristian to want to argue with someone simply to humiliate them, but it's not useful. It's not helping you to discover the truth of the matter. It's not helping them to be convinced of the truth. So when you go to argue with someone, you need to keep in mind, I am arguing so that we can find truth together. And if that's not why you're arguing, then you should probably shut up.
Right. And the other part of it is that, like, when we're talking about making sure that we individualize people as part of the solution to this, I don't know that we can effectively do that if we're continually hiding behind the screen. And I am not anti-internet, okay? I'm not the guy who says, well, the internet's bad for us and it's divided us. No, it hasn't. It just makes things easier, that's all. And unfortunately, it also makes things easier for the crappier side of human nature, right? It makes it easier for us to be arrogant, and it makes it easier for us to be insulated from opposing opinions. And it doesn't. It's not anything that worsens our character. It just exposes it, right? So I think that there are ways to use the internet to great advantage, but I also think that it provides this mask that sometimes is hard for us to see around. And so we say things and we do things online that are stupid that we would never do if we were in person. And so to me, a lot of social media, and honestly, I think if you talk to the creators of some of these social media outlets before the hyper polar political age, they would say that their intent was to connect people. Only now they're not really connecting people. They're connecting us with each other's avatars so that we can trash them and burn them down around each other. And it's a very Ready Player One sort of hypothetical, but it's true. Like, that's what we see. When I see, and that's where the individualization comes into play. You can use social media to reach out to people from behind the screen. You can use those interactions and those discussions to reach into someone's life, and that's an incredible power, and it's an incredible responsibility. And the Bible says that we're going to be held to account for every idle word that we speak. Do you think that we will not be held to account for every time we push send on a comment? Like, can that be? So I think the responsibility is there to be better people. And what I mean by that is that we tend to think, when you hop on Facebook or Twitter, you sort of think, well, now I am my celebrity self. I don't have to pay attention to the same rules that I otherwise would when I walk down the street and talk to my neighbors. But those social media outlets, they're not divorced from the rest of your life. That's your character. Your character online is just an extension of who you are. And so we need to be better. And the things when we talk about the part of the problems of virtue and its lack in society today, it's not that we don't have virtues, it's just they're the wrong ones, right? What's the higher virtue, tolerance or kindness? Is tolerance a goal, or is tolerance just a means to get to kindness, right? So I think when I'm talking about things that we can resolve to do better this year, how about a few of these? How about let's praise without excusing? Meaning, even if I like you and I agree with you on most policy things, if you screw up, you still screw up, and you still need to be held accountable for it. Or criticize without condemning. How about the ability to say, you know what, you're kind of a mess in some ways, and you really messed this up, but you're still a worthwhile person. That's okay. Employ grace, be humble, forgive. Like these are things that like they used to be common sense and they used to be part of our relationships, but somehow they got cut out of our online dialogue. And I think it's feeding that air of resentment that surrounds our politics and our culture. What else? What else, Josh? Hugo? What else do we need to throw in there this year that's really going to help us tie things back together and potentially, on a personal level, start to pull the country back together?
Well, I think that you pretty much summed it up there. I just really like that word.
There you have it, folks. Joel Kurtnitis has the solutions to everything in 2019.
Joel 2020. He's announcing today. No, but I really love that word individualizing. And again, yourself, you are an individual. The person you're talking to is an individual. They are not one of the many faces of some collective. They are not some online avatar. They are a person, and so are you. We need to respect each other and speak to each other in that light. And it's so easy to lose track of that. And I think you're right. The internet does make it easier to lose track of that fact. So maybe just for us all to be more mindful of it, that you are an individual and so are they, and speak to them as such.
All right. Well, hey, 2019 is off to a good start. We want to hear about your resolutions. We'll be posting that out on social media this week. Find out what you think is important. Do you think it's even possible to pull the country back together from where we're at now, with the divisions being what they are? How do we start healing these wounds? What are some of your resolutions? What are you going to try to do differently in 2019? Again, make sure you get out to social media to give us a follow on Facebook.com/TheCI Show and on Twitter @TheCI Show. You can also find us on Google Play and iTunes. Thanks so much for tuning in tonight. We got a great year ahead of us. Happy 2019, everyone.